In this example, I want to show you a really useful feature, especially if you're taking information from the web and trying to analyze it. So the technique is called text to columns, and again, it's very useful, particularly when you're browsing a website and they present the data and it's very difficult to get into Excel. For example, I was browsing baseballreference.com. The link is here, and I'll go ahead and post that later. But I was browsing this website and I took a look at some of the statistics from the team. And when I scrolled down, I noticed there was a lot of information in this table that I wanted to analyze. Anyway, a lot of times what you'll see is that websites will offer you a CSV file, which is comma separated values. So let's go ahead and hit this. And the idea is that we want to take this information and put it into a spreadsheet. So let's go ahead and copy it into the starting file. The starting file that I prepared for you is actually just a blank Excel file because I want to go through each step as it relates to getting this data into Excel. So let's go ahead and paste this because this is just text. We'll notice if we do an auto resize that all of this information is in one cell per row. And the idea is that we would like to expand this and to get it into more of a manageable form. So each one of these column headings are in a new column in Excel. Okay, for example, if we go back to the website, and I'm going to go ahead and reload this page, we want the data to appear in Excel just like it was here. Now, of course, we could potentially highlight this and copy it, but this is the safer way to get it into Excel. So we want columns to be ranked, games, date, the box score, team, opponent, runs, runs against, innings, and whatnot in Excel. So we've pasted it in. Let's go ahead and open this. If we were to highlight the entire column, we can use this feature called text to columns. And you can read here, it separates the content of one cell into separate columns. For example, you can separate the column of full names into a separate first and last column. Let's go ahead and hit this and take a look at the wizard. We have two options here. One is a fixed width. We're definitely not in a fixed width environment. There is definitely times when you need fixed width, but the more powerful option is the delimited. So let's go ahead and hit next. This screen gives you options of how your data is separated. In this case, this is a CSV, a comma separated. So it could be that the columns are separated by spaces, but in this case, it's a comma. So you can see once you hit comma, the data is previewed of how it's going to split down here in the window. Certainly you can type in other qualifiers, perhaps it's a hyphen or something like that. You can type that in here, but all we need for this example is a comma. So I'm going to hit next. Generally I use the general format for everything, but you could actually go through here and tell Excel what these certain columns are. For example, if this was formatted as a date, a month, day, year, you could actually change that. But in general, I leave everything in general and do my editing afterwards. So I'm just going to leave it as is and hit finish. Okay, after we do a resize, so I'm going to click this and resize this, we see our data is exactly how we wanted it. Every column is now separated, so I can actually do a little mining, if you will, of this data. So that's a very useful feature. So just to elaborate a little bit more on this, I thought it would be interesting to recreate this chart that I saw here in the game results feature. Now what this is called is basically a win-loss chart, and if you read here, the height of the bar is the margin of victory up to 10 runs, and furthermore the margin here on the negative is -10. So anyway, just to elaborate a little bit, let's go ahead and try to create that graph down at the bottom of the page here. And in order to do that, we need the margin of victory. So I'm going to calculate that here in column V, and go ahead and calculate the margin of victory by runs minus runs against. So a positive value corresponds to a win, and if we pull this formula down, a negative margin of victory corresponds to a loss. So let's go ahead and fill this down the remaining way, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the page. And I noticed here we actually have to do some editing before we create this win-loss chart. I'm going to delete several of these rows at once. Basically what you're seeing here is individual pages of the data. So they've put in a new header everywhere. So once you have them selected, you can actually delete those very easily. And I saw the playoffs were here. I'm actually going to delete the playoff information too. Okay, so now let's create that chart. I'm going to merge and center quite a large cell here. Go to merge and center. And what I'm going to do is go to insert. And you might be tempted to hit this win-loss. Win-loss will actually show positive and negative values, but it won't give you control over the height. And in that graph we saw on the website, it did control for the margin of victory. So what we actually need to do is create a column, Sparkline, and highlight the data field and change it to the margin of victory, which is here. The location will be the big merged and center cell I created here. And you're going to see that it very similarly mimics that chart that we saw on the website. So what we can do is change this perhaps maybe to this bright green one. And maybe I want to mimic that chart, so I want to control the negative points. So by default, once you select negative for this particular one, it turns out that the losses are red. There's a few other things you can do with the axis. I always like to show the axis, which puts a line in between the two. If you did want to control for a plus and minus 10 situation, what we could do is go to vertical minimum as a custom value. Minimum would be -10, and the maximum would be a custom value too as a +10. So if you wanted to control that, you certainly could, or you could default it back to automatic. It turns out in this example, if we look at the statistics of the margin of victory, the minimum was -10 and the max was 7, so there's not that big of a difference. But in summary, what we've done here is taken information on the web, which normally is very difficult, and we use the text to columns function so we could actually get this data into a spreadsheet, which we could do further analysis. For example, the margin of victory and the Sparkline we just created. Or perhaps you would like to do analysis on a particular player and whether they were able to win the game or come in with a save or something like that. Or perhaps the team and the opponent statistics. So you could do much more with this spreadsheet. With that being said, I'd like to take at least a few minutes here and do some basic formatting to essentially make this spreadsheet look a little better. I'm going to add simple all borders, give my column headings a fill, perhaps make those bold, scroll down, and the only thing I really want to do here is add another row so I can merge and center, give this Sparkline a title of Win-Loss Sparkline for the 2012 Cincinnati Reds, and perhaps make this text a little bit bigger, bold, maybe a gray fill, and then use the thick borders just to make this look a little bit more professional.